Welcome to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. I'm Sheng Peng, editor-in-chief of San Jose Hockey Now. Also, you can find my work at MEC Sharks and on Twitter at Sheng_Peng.
And I'm Keegan McNally. You can find me on Twitter at @halfwall_hockey, at my website, half-wallhockey.com, or at San Jose Hockey Now. Shang, this week, what do we got?
Kind of exciting episode. We have a very trade deadline focused episode. Talk with Mike Santos, who has been on the show before. He's the head of Team 33. That's not the new team that could be in Salt Lake City or in Atlanta or whatever. Team 33, if you guys remember from a summer podcast with them, it's an independent scouting service. All former NHL scouts or former NHL front office people working there. And so I wanted to get his opinion of what they're seeing out of the Sharks players this year. Obviously, the Sharks have struggled, but what are they seeing out of Anthony Duclair? Is the skating still there? What do they like about Amara Ferraro? Nico Sturm, what can he add to a contender? How good is Kaapo Kähkönen? The questions like that. And so anyway, wanted to get a good idea of that. And also we talk a little bit about trade pick values with him too. And so anyway, that's all kind of a trade deadline, give you kind of a primer of what the Sharks have, what they might expect in a trade. And so just a couple of teases. He likes Ferraro a lot, doesn't like Granlund as much. And so anyway, listen to that later in this podcast.
Now we've got a full hour of breaking down most of the Sharks UFA to be trade bait targets. So it's a good
and a couple
good
more
interview.
besides the UFAs.
Yeah, exactly. And some ones that have just been kind of in the news, like Ferraro and Granlund, like you mentioned. So great interview with Mike. You guys should stick around for it. Before then, we're going to have a little bit of discussion. That not too much has happened since the last time that we spoke with y'all, but we're going to cover the injuries, the injury news related to Couture and Hertl, and some of their expected timelines for return. The two games that they played, just the loss to Winnipeg and the triumphant win against Calgary. A little bit about the play of Filip Zadina in that game. An interesting set of quotes from Kevin Labanc this week. And then finally, we'll go into the Mike Santos interview. So that's all that's coming up on this week's episode of the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. All right. What you got, Chang?
Well, I think actually we have a lot to talk, a lot of news, but maybe there's not too much insight to provide on it. First, you mentioned the injuries, Tomas Hertl and Logan Couture. Tomas Hertl getting his knee cleaned up once again, and we don't know his timeline. He had surgery on his knee. Now, this is not his 2020. He had a torn ACL, MCL. 2013, of course, torn ACL, MCL. This isn't that. That's the good news. This is just a cleanup. But anyway, no timeline on him yet. We'll find out. I think it is a kind of a interesting timing of it all. If you read the statement, it's as blatant a tank statement as I've ever seen. I can play to paraphrase. I could play, but we just decided I'd be better if I.
Yeah, and he had just played in the All-Star game, and they
I
decided he
mean,
was healthy
he
enough
didn't
for
look great in
that.
an All-Star game. I would say that he looked like he was doing a good imitation of Erik Karlsson. Of course, call back to 2019 All-Star when Erik played the All-Star game in San Jose. Even though he looked like he was kind of giving it about 70% with his groin injury, and actually turned out to be well-founded. He was obviously very, very hurt, and he didn't come back until near the end of the season.
Yeah. And so we should at least expect multiple weeks from now for him to be
Yes,
back.
that's what they said. Several weeks. We will keep checking on a timeline. Maybe he'll be out for the rest of the season. I'm not really sure, but of course, the timing and the statement of it is all kind of interesting. Next, we have Logan Couture, and Logan Couture, unfortunately, a setback. From his deep groin issue, I gotta look it up again, but
Osteitis pubis.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So setback from that after the All-Star break. That is, I think, pretty concerning. Just considering that he had 9 days or so off. Unlike Hertl had an All-Star game to get to, right? So kind of made sense to give Hertl a little bit of time at first, when it first came out and before the news came out that Hertl was going to clean up his knee. But anyway, with Couture, it's a setback. We just have no timeline right now. And so we'll see. Hopefully he recovers quickly. I think for him, I think it's going to be tough if they shut him down, just because he's had really not a lot of success this season, and so it's going to be really a lost season for him. So I think it'll be good if a Couture can come back and just have a strong finish, just so he can build off that into next season. And going back to Hertl, actually, I want to ask you what you think about this. How much of a concern do you think is the once again another knee issue, even though it's just kind of cleanup? I mean, how do you kind of see Hertl or Couture? How do you see both injuries?
I think it's interesting because the fans and a lot of people always expect like medical procedures or these kind of things to be hockey players basically to be robots, right? Like or cars, right? Like you put oil in your car and it gets better, or you like just do these procedures. And in some ways, Hurdles is kind of like that. It's like at a certain point you need this clean out, and it's not that invasive a procedure, so he should be okay.
Okay.
I think is the way that I would think about it. And players get these kind of things done on arthroscopically, like they just get little scopes done on their knee, and it's not that big of a deal. But you never know. Somebody with prior knee issues, how they're going to react after surgery. But I'd say it's not as big of a deal as like Couture's, I'd say, is more because of he gave so much time to the rehab, right? Like however many months.
The recovery, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the recovery, the trying to make sure that he's comfortable back on the ice, and then what changed to make him uncomfortable is kind of concerning. And the issue seems to be lingering a lot more than obviously he would like. And in a season like this, there's obviously I don't think there's a rush to get him back out there, but you're right. Like he didn't look amazing in the 6 games that he even really played when he came back. The Sharks didn't either, but I mean, well, actually, they had a little bit of success, I think.
They were good in terms of their record,
Yeah.
but like individually, I think
He didn't look
Logan was doing
amazing.
a lot of the right things, but he was smart positionally as he always is. But yeah, he didn't have a lot of pop, not a lot of offense. So so I think that I think just for his he talked a lot about the mental health of coming back and just like how much he's struggling when he was sitting out. So I think for him, unlike Hertl, who's an all-star, and Hertl kind of returned to form, and he doesn't need that sort of that feel good ending of the season because he's already had a good season. Couture, though, I think could use a few games. I'm not saying that Couture needs to come back and score a point per game for the last 25 games of the season, but even just a couple of weeks coming back, feeling good, contributing, I think will be good.
Yeah, and the other and Hertl is a little bit younger as well. Couture is in the last stage of his career, so I do wonder about his longevity with his injury. But you never know; these things can turn around pretty quickly.
And the reason why I ask you in particular, Keegan, if you want to speak a little bit to your medical expertise.
Sure. I mean, I'm not a sports medicine doctor, an orthopedic doctor. I'm an emergency doctor, so I work in the emergency department. But I love hockey, so I've been following these kind of injuries for a long time, and I see more acute injuries than this. But like, from my medical background, I could surmise a little bit about these kind of things. So I'm not I'm not an orthopedic, I'm not a sports med doc, just an ER doc. But yes, that's kind of the my background. But the Couture one is to me is interesting just because of how much time, and they opted for no surgical intervention, and
right, and that might have happened, right?
Yeah, and there is just looking through things about this injury. There are surgical options. It just depends on what basically part of the pelvis is involved and stuff like that. So I don't know. Maybe something for him to explore in the offseason if it's gonna keep lingering. But
I don't know. I don't know what Erik Karlsson's precise groin injury was, but of course it seemed like it took Erik a good year or two, 2 years to really get back in a consistent. The skating is good. It wasn't until I think not just the year before, not just last year, but 2021-22, where it really felt like we were seeing consistently the close to the Erik Karlsson that we're used to. And so I don't know if there's any kind of worry with that, with considering that Couture is it basically in his mid-30s. So if he has a surgery, just how long it's going to take for him to come back to 100% if he ever does.
Yeah. Wishing for the best. It is an interesting timing though. The tankathon, the Sharks are actually just gaining points on Chicago every week.
How did it happen? They're getting Connor Bedard back. How did the Sharks gain points on him?
They got Connor Bedard back this week. So here's hoping that he just goes on a tear, becomes super rookie, and
Yeah.
scores like 25 goals in the next couple of games. But I don't know. It's a lot for a really bad team in Chicago. But the Sharks, yeah, their center depth is decimated after we thought
Mhm.
that they might have an actual okay center depth. Basically, they
Yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so wishing the best for both Couture and Hertl. But either way, let's talk a little bit about the two games that
Mm.
we watched this week. I will say the Winnipeg game was one of the most boring games of hockey I've seen in a very long time.
Oh, for the Sharks it was. Yeah, not for
Yeah.
Winnipeg. But I want to speak though quickly about that game, Kaapo
Hmm.
Kähkönen. Um, Not only, of course, he made 38 saves, I
Yeah,
think,
that was great.
only allowed one, but it's bore out in the stats. I just was looking at it. According to different sites or measurements have kind of different standards, but Kähkönen leads right now. Sport Logic, he has the best inner slot save percentage in the league. That's according to Sport Logic, all situations. I looked at NHL.com. They have slightly different, but they have him in the 83rd percentile of all high danger save percentage in the league. And I think Natural Stat Trick had him. I think it was like fourth in their measure of high danger save percentage. So however way you cut it, Kähkönen is having a great year.
And also to spoil a little bit about the Mike Santos interview, they like him too. They're pretty
Yeah,
high
like
on
it quite a
them.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, Team 33 is very high on my Kaapo Kähkönen. So I yeah, want to see in the spoiler again if they want to keep him for the year or if they're thinking more about trading him because he is a UFA to be. So
Yep.
but he had an amazing game that game. And
Hmm.
he at the very end it was like there was a little bit about the possible injury with him too, right?
It seems. I mean, it seems like he said he was okay, and that's one of those things
Yeah.
where none of the local reporters were there,
Hmm.
and anyway. We made a request to speak with Kaapo. This is before his injury, just because he was having such a great game. He was the star of the game for the Sharks. I actually think he got first start of the game, even though they were in Winnipeg, which is unusual. But anyway, he came out and talked with us over Zoom. And
Sure.
often, not all the time, but oftentimes when a player is hurt, especially if he's seriously hurt, he's not going to come out and speak with the media, even if we ask for him. So usually. And so this was a case where Koppel came out, which is a good sign. Oh, also too, actually, more importantly, he backed up Mackenzie Blackwood the next night, so
Yeah. Yeah.
he should be fine. So I think it's a
Nothing to
non-issue. It
do.
looked bad, it looked really bad, and considering the Sharks' injury luck this year is like, oh, here we go again.
Yep.
But yeah, I think it's a non-issue.
Same thing with Sturm at the end of that game too, right? Like it
Right,
looks
look
bad.
bad, but he
Fine.
played the next game.
Yeah. Um, so in contrast to one of the most boring games from the Sharks, the next night they have one of the most fun games. Like I
Right.
was having a great time the entire game watching this Sharks team beat a Calgary team that's very up and down this season in terms of their consistency. Um, let's go through it a little bit. We don't normally do game breakdowns, but let's talk about Zadina because this was a special
Sure.
night from Zadina.
Yep. Career high 4 points. Yeah. What'd you see out of him?
He just looked like I put a post on Twitter where it was like all of a
Mhm.
sudden Zadina woke up and remembered how to play hockey. Like he just was like he plugged into the matrix and was like, "Whoa, actually I can do this fine." And nobody it was it's interesting to see because the guy's drafted, fifth overall, whatever he is. There's clearly a
Six.
lot
Yeah.
of sixth overall. There's clearly a lot of skill that's been there. It's just for however long, how many years since he's been drafted, it's hard for a coach to tap
Yeah.
into
Six
it.
years. Yeah.
It's just every year it's like, when is it going to happen? And it hasn't. And then you look at this game and you go, oh my God, like if this guy could play this way every game, this guy's a superstar. But what is happening that prevents it? But he really was. He handled the puck well. He had, great handling, kept the play alive in the offensive zone constantly.
Mhm.
Found the next play to then get back in position to shoot the puck. It was just perfect. from him.
Yeah, I'm not going to be quite as high. I mean, I like Zadina, and
Sure.
we've talked a lot about Zadina this year, but I think he benefited from a couple of very, very curious decisions by Calgary defensemen on their breakout passes.
Curious.
Yes, that's a nice way to put it, right? So one that Zadina intercepted and gave to Granlund, and the
Mhm.
other one what Bailey took, and Zadina just great patience from Zadina, went for
Yeah.
the extra pass instead of the shot, which I was watching. I was like, oh, this looks like, I was like, this is going to be another bad, like, he should have shot a moment, but no, it was a great pass, and Bailey roofed it. And then the goals, I mean, that deflection, I mean, what you like about it was actually the basicness of that play. It wasn't the
Hmm.
skill. It just, he beat his guy to the front, and Sturm just lobbed it in front, and Zadina put his stick there, and it rainbowed. I don't think that kind of deflection is necessarily what Zadina, we can count on him to do all the time. That kind of circus kind of deflection shot.
Also
But
helps when the goaltender's like 5'11" or whatever
yeah,
Dustin Wolf
right.
is.
But the key to that is just basic hockey, just going to the net,
Mm.
right, and beating your check to the net. And finally, his last goal, nice shot.
Yeah.
But we do see that from Zadina from time to time. But I didn't see a lot here that told me that this was going to kick off some sort of
Yeah.
a great Zadina revival. But it does remind me though that once again, and I've written about Zadina a lot. I've written to this point that I think if he can play a basic game, the points will come. And so I like the basic part of on the forecheck when
Sure.
he intercepts the pass, right? He's in the right position. I don't know if he did anything great defensively to kind of goad, I think it was Hannafin, into making that pass, but he was in the right position. Full credit to him. And also, he had the patience when he attacked the net. He waited on Granlund to join him in the end instead of just taking a shot, which would be what a more basic player would, what I would do if I was out there. If I suddenly come up with this turnover and suddenly the goalie's right in front of me, I just shoot it. I'm not waiting
Sure.
for Granlund to jump on ice. So that's good. That patience was noteworthy there. And then like I said, the deflection goal, just go to the net. And so I think with that, so I guess I would kind of say that is Zadina's takeaway from this game is that this is going to be the beginning of like his ascent to fulfilling his draft potential. I wouldn't look at it that way. I think
Yeah.
if he looks at it a different way, as good defense leads to good offense, and just keep thinking that way, I think he can play in this league. I do think that. I said that many times. I think that I like his speed. He works hard. He's deceptively strong. So I think if he irons out sort of like his defensive zone coverage, which he alluded to after the game, that's something that he's worked on, and we've seen that in the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
Also, too, he's also very rough with the puck in terms of taking chances that he shouldn't, especially in the beginning of the season. He was doing that. Actually, I was looking at some Sport Logic stats in terms of turnover rate and whatnot, and Zadina is up there among forwards. And so the intentions are the right place for him, but those kind of things are the things that kind of prevent him from being higher up in the lineup. This kind of offensive explosion, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily real, but I
Yeah.
do think that there is the potential in there to be a really good third line player with that potential to kind of if everything were to work out, the sort of the ideal third line player where the guy has top six skill, I think, but don't worry about that. He's not gonna, you can't count on him to produce. That's fine, but he's the kind of guy that can like take over a playoff game or something like that from a with better matchups on a lower line. I think that's his like ultimate ceiling to me.
That
And
makes
anyway,
sense.
yeah,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I agree. I don't think this is going to be the takeoff game.
yeah.
I
And
don't
if it
think he
is,
just
that's
hasn't
awesome.
shown
Yeah,
it.
I,
Yeah,
I hope I'm wrong. Yeah, so
he just hasn't shown that kind of consistency even when he has had good games that he follows it up with another one and another one. It's always been like,
right.
oh, there's one game, and then you wait 3 weeks until you remember the Zadina's in the lineup. And yeah, so but I really enjoyed his confidence as well. After he did
Sure.
start to put in some points, he was like just way more confident with the puck than he normally is, and he was making less mistakes. Um, at least trying to make plays because you're right, he does have some costly turnovers in him from prior games. So
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. It was still an interesting pickup. Like obviously he came over with confidence in himself to prove it this year, and I wouldn't say that he has technically. He's just
No,
kind of
I don't
been the
believe
same.
so. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll
But
see.
hopefully it does start a stretch where the Sharks see him. I mean, he's young enough, and I
Yeah.
think he's good in the room and all that kind of stuff. That you're like, hey, sign him for a couple more years. This guy can be a part of the next good Sharks team, and so that would
Yeah.
be great if that were to happen, and that maybe can happen in the next 30 games or so.
Yeah, that's definitely an opportunity for him.
Hmm.
He's an RFA to be. So
Yep.
um I mean, Justin Bailey had a good game as well.
Hmm.
He that whole resurgence from him as well was good to see.
My
But it
my
was
favorite, Luke Cunnin.
Luke Cunnin had a good game.
He
It
can
was
shoot. He can shoot, right? I mean, there's no question about that. So,
sometimes
even yeah, no, he can.
he can.
Uh,
He hits a lot of posts.
when he gets a hold of it, he can
Yes.
launch it. I mean, I think
Oh, 100%.
that's why there's been a hope that like we even when the Sharks traded for him and he hasn't fulfilled it. I'm not trying to argue that, but like when the Sharks traded for him, that he could maybe get himself up to a 15-20 goal. That's the kind of
Yep.
rate he scored at in a couple of good years there he had in Minnesota there, and so yeah, like that. That's why he's fired. Yeah.
We need a post by Luke Cunnin tally this season. I don't know what it is, but he just hits so many posts. I
No,
feel
we
like
can look that up on NHL. Though I do
we gotta
feel
find out
NHL is not very accurate with the post count though. But actually though, I'm just curious. So since you bring up
because I feel like he's
but
hit posts
yeah,
constantly. He even hit a post in this game, and he had 2 goals. I
he
think.
did. It
Yeah.
looked like one
So
of those like here we go again. Even the first goal
yeah,
didn't even look like it scored.
exactly. That's what I was expecting, and
Yeah,
you
they
know,
had to go to review to make sure that wait, Luke Cunnin scored. Wait, what?
yeah. But he does. He has a very powerful shot when he can
He
get it
does.
into the
He
right
does.
spot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know people have not like fans. The Eklund Cunningham pairing hasn't been popular, but
Sure.
if you want to look at the basically like pairing a guy that has a good shot with the guy who can set him up, just like Eklund did, especially on that post shot actually,
Hmm.
because that's Eklund drawing the defender to himself along the wall. And then lays a perfect pass to Cunningham, getting into position if for that one timer for that blast, right?
Yep.
And I think that's what the Sharks envision. So I would say even though yes, obviously Cunningham hasn't scored a lot this year, and that kind of duel hasn't panned out the way the Sharks hoped. That there was intelligence to it though, and I think we saw it on that post by Cunningham.
Yep. Just gotta hit the net.
Gotta hit the net. Yeah, you gotta hit the net for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. But
While you look that up,
yes, I'm getting there.
yes, I mean, I actually don't know if I've ever looked up that stat on NHL.com or wherever it is.
I have. But like I said,
Yeah.
I don't find it to be accurate because game to game, like there was that one game recently where Toronto, right? It was in Toronto, I
Hmm.
think, where I'm pretty sure it counted like 7 posts or something like that,
Hmm.
and like on NHL it was like 5 or something like that, and so yeah, so that's one of those that I'm not so sure
Sure.
about how .com is tracking it. So
Let's talk a little bit about Kevin Labanc. Um,
okay.
because I think um, we've come to an interesting. The writing has been on the wall, and
Yep.
that's actually part of your headline of your article. Labanc sees the writing on the wall for Shark's career. Though it's been on the wall for a year or two, but now it's really on the wall. Like
No, but
we
especially
know
this year though, right? Yeah, because with
exactly.
every coach, you're like hoping like, okay,
Hmm.
this is the coach that could kind of unlock a consistent game from LeBanc. But this year though, yes, especially recently, Granlund goes down,
Yep.
Hertl goes down, Couture. I know these are all centermen, but
Yeah.
LeBanc still can't get in the lineup.
Nope. And they play McDonald on the wing instead of Labanc, and
Right,
like
right.
anybody but Labanc. And I do wonder why he has not been waived yet, other than I don't know. I honestly don't have an answer to that question. There was that rumor that he might be waived that was not real earlier this year, and then never happened. But
It might have been though, yeah. So
we don't know.
yeah,
That was a
but
whole thing.
well, yeah. With in terms of writing on the wall with LeBanc, though, I think I mean, I think he knew. I mean, and that's something that I actually wrote a story
Hmm.
a month ago. Actually, Kobe guy who helped me a lot was he wrote the story, but I interviewed Kevin all
Sure.
the way back in Toronto when the Sharks were there, and interestingly, and I didn't want to put too much focus on it because I don't want to be a guy to take a quote out of context if the guy just says something mistakenly, right? But if you look at the end of Kobe's story about Labanc, what Kevin told me, this was a good month and a half ago that Kevin says, I don't know where things will take me, but it's been a lot of fun being in San Jose. And I heard that I was like, wait, you just refer to San Jose as past tense? we're
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
we're like not even halfway into the season yet. But I think that he knew quite well, and we'll have to dig in at a later time just why it's been so difficult for him, especially on the awful Sharks team. It's not as if David Quinn is running a Western Conference leading team here, and there's no space for Kevin Labanc. You would kind of understand that, but this is the second worst team in the league, has been the worst team in the league for most of the season, and that Kevin can't get in is surprising. And I want to speak up for Kevin a little bit too. That last year he still showed that he could be quite productive. He had a really good
Sure.
stretch with Timo Meyer and Tomas Hertl. He had 23 points, I think, in 29 games with those guys. And yeah, he's not going to be your number one player on the line for sure, but he was doing a really good job being a complementary winger to kind of top line or top six guys there. And I think Kevin can do that for a team. But anyway, though, in terms of just Kevin's comments, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not sure what good it'll do because the Sharks haven't played him. When the Sharks have played him, he hasn't produced. He makes
Yep.
way too much money. He makes more cash than his AAV, which is another issue too.
It's a big
And
problem. Yeah.
yeah, so just Sharks only have one retention spot. But one of the things that was interesting, and I spoke with Kevin's agent, Michael Curran. He confirmed Frank Saravalli's report that Vancouver was interested in Kevin Labanc over the summer. Frank had reported possible Kevin Labanc for Tyler Myers swap. I don't know if other elements were part of it, but both on 1 year left, not great contracts, right? And while Michael Curran, he couldn't confirm that Tyler Myers was part of the deal. He did confirm though that it was indeed Vancouver, that Vancouver was interested, and of course that's a last summer thing. Vancouver has moved on. They picked up Nikita Zadorov and Elias Lindholm, and just expensive players, basically, right? And they're up against the cap, so I don't think
Yeah.
Labanc going there right now makes any sense. But it shows that there is some interest in a Labanc in his playmaking ability and whatnot. And so I can see something happening in the summer for him. I know that a lot, like the some people are saying, oh, he's not even going to get like a PTO or whatever, right? I think he can get that, maybe even a little more. He's not going to get a great contract for sure,
Yeah.
but and it wouldn't surprise me too if he comes back. And I mentioned it in the article that I wrote recently about Kevin Labanc. That, and I mentioned this on his podcast multiple times actually. That I could see kind of a Stefan Nason kind of. Stefan Nason is a really interesting case, and ironically, after leaving the Sharks too. But after leaving the Sharks, Carolina picked him up. I think they signed him to a two-way contract. He had a great year with the Chicago Wolves, and then Carolina brought him to the NHL. And since the last 2 years in Carolina, Stefan Nason is averaging half a point per game. I think he has like 63 points over like 120 games. Most importantly, he's doing it playing like 12 minutes a night. He's basically playing
Yeah.
4 to 9 minutes, but he has a regular power play role.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that could be sort of where Kevin Labanc could end up. Not I'm not saying Carolina, but a team can use him in that way. Like if you can hide him on a fourth line, if you don't need a fourth line to be this grind line like a lot of fourth lines are, and you can play him with players that can hide him a little bit, and or you can put him. I think Nason they actually do use with better players, but don't play him a lot though. So probably offensive zone. I gotta look into how they use Nathan more at even strength. But yeah, if you're selective with how you use Kevin Labanc, basically is what I'm saying. I think he can probably be an effective NHL player still. He's young enough for sure. He's 28, so
Yeah, he just really needs to be. And I said this a couple weeks ago, months ago. He just needs to be somewhere else. He just needs
he
to be on a
needs to.
different
Yeah,
team.
yeah.
He can't be lingering in the Sharks anymore. But I don't think there's a way to get him out of there before the end of the season. I just don't see a team taking the
It'll
chance
be
on his
tough.
contract.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean the contract is obviously the biggest part of it. I know some
yeah.
people are like, oh, they can agree to terminate contracts. Why would Kevin Labanc walk away from? I
From
mean, it's
whatever
it's like eight hundred
$1 million or
thousand
whatever.
dollars or whatever for
Yeah,
like literally like, and yeah, I
no
wouldn't
work.
expect anyone to do that. Like Filip Zadina, but Zadina I think is a really rare case.
Sure.
I mean, obviously he's a rare case, yeah, because there's not been a lot of guys to do that.
And it's less money and all that. And like,
Well, Zadina walked away from a lot, but
I think it was like
but
1.8 to like 1.1, so it was
no, but
downgrade of 7.
Zadina walked away from 4.56 of cash
Was it
over a couple of
4.5?
years. Yeah, yeah, it's 4. I've written so many stories about it. So even
Yeah,
though the cap hit was 1.8 or whatever, the AAV, the
sure.
cash was actually 4.56
That's a good amount
million.
of money. I didn't realize
That's
that.
a
Yeah,
lot of money, and so Lebanc would be walking away from less, but I
sure.
think I mean I don't expect Kevin to do that. But I think the more likely course is that Lebanc does get waived, no one picks him up, and he should go down to the Barracuda and really just kill it there. And
Yep,
if he goes down with a good attitude and plays hard and is a good leader down there, that's going to help his signability in the offseason. Teams will see that hey,
sure.
he went down there, he didn't pout. He did a good job working with the younger players. So if we sign him and he doesn't work out on the Angel Club, then he has some value. Like he's a good team player, which I think Kevin has shown before. I know that we all believe we don't know this for sure, but we all believe that a few years ago after his breakout season, that 1 year $1 million contract he signed, he did that for the Sharks.
Yeah,
And he did that to help them stay competitive, and that also helped them. Of course, that helped him get his big contract, which was obviously an overpayment. But on the other hand, though, Kevin Labanc for a year, he risked his body. He didn't know what was going to happen out there in that year. Um, he was
yeah,
making just $1 million off of a 56-point season, and so that's putting your money where your mouth is, and so I do think Kevin wants to win. I do think that he's a team player. It just really hasn't worked with the Sharks. I'm not really sure what the disconnect was, but yeah, honestly, yeah, when we asked David Quinn about him, a lot of times I feel like David doesn't want to answer questions about him. I think he clenches up a little bit, if I'm being honest about that. My perception of it, and so yeah, and then there was the recent exchange where Labanc said, I know what I'm capable of doing when I get out there. This was just a week ago. And so I know when I get an opportunity, I can go out there and execute. And Quinn responded, maybe not directly to what LeBanc said, but LeBanc said, we watch every practice. And it's funny, people talk about needing opportunity. Well, every day is an opportunity. I'm not out there making my grocery list while practice is going on. I've been paying attention to what guys are doing, how hard they're
sure.
working. And so this is a clear I think I'd safe to say that there's a disconnect here between coach and player.
Yeah.
And so Lebanc needs a change of scenery for sure. And I think he'll get it. And like I said, it wouldn't surprise me if he flourishes, if he's like a very good value contract.
I'm gonna predict that he gets signed by Tampa, and he gets like a $800,000 contract by Tampa or something like that. That's my
Yeah.
prediction. Sticking with it. I don't know why
And
Tampa,
how do you
other
think he
than
does? How do you think
I
he
think he
does in
does.
Tampa?
I think he does well. I think
Okay.
better than he obviously this year. I think he probably in the 20-25 point range is what I'd put him at, something like that.
Oh,
And he's
I
like decently productive in a very limited minutes role.
I'm gonna go maybe 30-ish and with
Nice.
very limited playing time. And so his rate stats will be really nice, and he's gonna have a regular power play role. And yeah, I
Do you
could
got a
see it.
team? Do you got a team?
No, I don't, and I need to think
Okay.
about like if I really like. I think it's a possibility. I don't know if I would like bet my life on it or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a distinct possibility because I mean, I know everyone wants to focus on 2018-19 and the game 7 against Vegas. Oh, that's the last thing Kevin Labanc was good, but I don't think that's true though.
Mhm.
Kevin Labanc had really good stretches. I think it was when he was with maybe Couture and Evander Kane a couple of
Mhm.
years ago. He had a very good stretch with, I've mentioned many times, with Meyer and Hertl. So he's had good stretches. He hasn't been able to put together a full good season. Every time he's had these good stretches, he's sort of fallen into the doghouse of the coach, be it Bob Bugner or David Quinn, right, last
Sure.
year. And so he hasn't been consistent, but there are good stretches there for sure, of a guy that is absolutely a middle six NHL winger. And so, yeah, I mean, again, if you just look at even look at the pure stats, I mean, 2017 to 2023. So it's not just his 2018-19 season, 2017 to 2023, average half a point a game.
Yeah.
And so can Kevin Labanc score at that rate? And he's just 28 still. Can he still do that? For sure, I think.
Yeah. Um, yeah, but did teams do this, right? They end up signing a guy that's like Jonathan Drouin in
Mhm.
Colorado, where it's
Yeah,
like they just need
that's a good
a
comp
cheap winger that's going to provide you offense
with
to
upside.
pair with upside, to pair
Yeah,
with your superstar guys that are obviously out there in all situations. So you're just
yeah,
kind of trying to maximize dollars with a guy that can actually put points on the
right,
board. So
right.
maybe that's Kevin Labanc.
I think that's why,
Jonathan
yeah,
Drouin
Tampa
is
is actually really interesting just because they're
they do
constantly a
that
team that is kind of capped out and looking for guys who can outperform their contracts, right? Barkley
100%.
Gaudreau, Brandon Hagel before they gave him a big contract, so guys like that, yeah. So
Yeah, they're always trying to go for that buy low opportunity to get their window extended, essentially.
and there
And
isn't any buy low lower than Kevin Labanc right now.
you can
So
get them for literally nothing. You can, you can, yep, just give them a call in the off season. So, all the best for Kevin when it does come to an end for the Sharks. But yeah, but you also be good on Barracuda and actually like gets them to win a few more games. That would be sick.
yeah,
Um, that's
maybe
a good
help with
play.
actual play. I actually was thinking about this. We were having the big conversation about a Barracuda a couple weeks ago with the Sharks getting healthier, and obviously it's been sort of uh this idea has sort of been tamped down by Hertl and Couture going down. But I was
Hmm.
thinking though, when we thought Hertl and Couture were coming back and they were going to have all their centers right, that the Barracuda were going to have a lot of players possibly coming their way. And even with Hertl and Couture out, the Sharks are when they activate Smith and Thrun, they have one extra guy that they got to send down, and so or yeah, they have 24 healthy bodies if Smith and Thrun are healthy, and
Hmm.
so that could be a LeBanc, that could be a defenseman. I don't think it was going to be initially. I had projected Carpenter, but it's not going to be Carpenter because obviously they're short centerman now. But
Yeah.
so they're going to have. I mean, they won't have a full team coming, a full line coming back, which kind of looked like they might for a hot second there when we thought Hertl and Couture were coming back. Like if the if the Barracuda get Carpenter and LeBanc within a week, that could be a first line AHL first line, and of course shades of 2017 and 2016 and old school Worcester and the first year of the Barracuda. Uh,
Yeah.
but uh, but yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking. But yeah, like the Barracuda are due to get some talent though soon from the Sharks if the Sharks can cross your fingers, stay healthy.
Yeah. All right. We don't have too much else to say. Do you have anything else for this week? I think we've all said a lot
Nope.
in this short period of time. Yeah, it's been a quick week. There's only been 2 games. Obviously, the Sharks returned from break on Wednesday. So next week we'll have a full week of games to talk about, and I'm sure lots of new news.
Maybe a trade or
Uh,
something. Yeah, trade deadline
maybe.
just 3 weeks away.
Yep. But yes, everybody enjoy the Mike Santos interview. It was awesome, and also we might hear from him after the trade deadline, see if any of those things that we talked about came to fruition. But
Yeah.
we'll see. All right. Hope you guys have a good week. Bye.
From 1997 to 2018, Michael Santos was in an NHL or AHL front office. He's been an assistant GM with the NHL's New York Islanders and Florida Panthers. He was a general manager of the AHL's Rochester Americans and San Antonio Rampage. He was president of the ECHL's Norfolk Admirals, also director of hockey operations for the Islanders, Panthers, and Nashville Predators. He's now heading Team 33. Once again, remind everybody, because they're in the news now, that's not the 33rd NHL team. Team 33 is an independent scouting service that goes to NHL games. You'll see them on the scouting list that you're seeing that a lot of writers are posting now. They're an independent scouting service that consults for NHL teams, staffed entirely by ex-NHL front office personnel. And he's now here with the San Jose Hockey Now podcast to lend his front office insight and expertise on everything trade deadline for the Sharks.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Mike, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. One note before we get started here. Regardless of whether or not the NHL adds another team, we're not changing our name. So I
was going to ask you that. Yeah.
So whether it's Salt Lake City or whoever comes into the league next, they're going to have to be Team 34. So let's just
keep it that way. That's fair.
Well,
it's a good name.
Mike, yeah, it is a terrific name. It always gets people's attention around, especially around this season where, again, all those scouting lists are being posted. So I wanted to ask you first, specifically, just to let everybody know again. And again, we told people before, you've been on the podcast before. We're talking Erik Karlsson trade over the summer with you. But what is Team 33?
Yeah, well, and the Erik Karlsson deal went through, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
It did.
So you guys
finally.
You guys were right on it. Team 33 is a hockey operations management program. I mean, as you said, it's staffed entirely by former NHL GMs, coaches, players, and scouts. And we operate as if we're an NHL organization, just we do not have a roster of players. And the advantage is that allows us to be unbiased in our evaluation of everything that has to do with NHL teams and their players and prospects, whether that be evaluating their contracts, their injury situation, maybe off-ice issues, and of course their performance on the ice. So it's a huge advantage for the NHL clubs that use us, because we all know that when we're close to an organization, we tend to have bias, whether that's positive or negative. And so the fact that they can use an organization like ours and get an unbiased opinion is really helpful. And we can do anything that a front office can do. We can help with trades. Of course, that's what we'll talk about this evening with the trade deadline coming up. We can find the right player that'll fill a need for an organization, whether that be at the NHL level, the American Hockey League level, or a prospect. We can evaluate different situations. So if a transaction may be sending a player to the minor leagues and recalling another player, we can evaluate that transaction in advance, let the organization know what that will do to their payroll, how it'll affect their on-ice player personnel, what type of player they're going to be putting into the lineup, what type of player they're going to be taking out, how it'll affect their salary cap. All of this we can do for them, and we can help them negotiate a contract as well. So we can do anything they need us to do, and again, with an unbiased eye.
And also wanted to ask you too. You had mentioned some teams that you had consulted with recently. Do you want to share that, just so everybody can kind of be in on just how deep Team 33 is into everything?
Yeah, well, we've had two clubs that have been working with us for a year and a half now, the Anaheim Ducks and the Montreal Canadiens. And as of late, of course, now with the trade deadline coming up, we're getting lots of one-off calls from different organizations looking for little pieces of information here and there, or some help here and there. We just spoke to Colorado the other day. We spoke to Calgary about a week ago. I talked to Minnesota last month. So we're constantly getting our tires kicked by some of these clubs that I think are starting to realize what we can do for them and how we can help them. So hopefully we can do the same for the Sharks.
Yeah, the San Jose Sharks should consider this a free demo for for them. So hopefully, so hopefully Mike and company are listening to this one, and they give the proper credit if they use anything from you. But
Yeah.
so Sharks obviously have a ton of guys available. Their record's not very good. They have lost a lot of pending UFAs, and so they have a lot of guys who are available at this trade deadline. And so the way we're going to do this, guys, is we're just going to run over some of the names. And we have over a half dozen names here. And we're going to ask Mike about each player, kind of how his team of scouts, I believe there's 21 or so scouts that you have in different AHLs, or I'm sorry, who go to games in different AHL cities. And so how the Team 33 scouts are seeing the player this year, and also to talk about what the player's trade value is in your opinion. And so the first player that I want to ask you about is Anthony Duclair. And Anthony Duclair, he's got he's pending UFA, 3 million AAV. And so what are your scouts seeing about Anthony this year?
So I mean, the first thing I want to say before then we'll get right into Anthony is the Sharks are in actually a good position because, as you know, when this time of year comes all the time, you're trying to decide, are you a seller or a buyer, right? And those teams that are sort of in the middle, they've got tough decisions to make, right? Do we go and try to make a playoff spot? Do we try to be patient and stick with maybe a building or rebuilding program that we have going on? And of course, you've got the teams that are up at the top of the standings who are like, well, we've got a shot to make the run at the cup this year. And, do we go after some pieces that we need to put us over the top, maybe give us some depth? And unfortunately, at this time of year, overpay.
Yeah, for sure.
So, the Sharks, they're obviously in a rebuilding situation. And so, they are, like you said, in a position where they can sell some things and continue to try to develop younger players and hopefully build towards a plan they have for the future. Duclair, a guy that they got, that played in Florida last year, had an injury. He's certainly a guy that could help, as a depth player for a team. We look at him in a couple of ways. Obviously, he's a role player at this point in his career, but he still brings offense. Despite the injury that he had, he still skates well. And his hockey
that's his trademark, right?
Yeah, and his hockey sense is high. Duclair, again, his offensive ability is something that you can add, especially if you're a club that's trying to look and add him to a lower line. The cap hit for one of these top teams that's looking to add depth might be a little bit of a deterrent. I mean, at this point in the year, and you're going to have to, if you're the Sharks, in this type of situation, you're going to have to take something back that's not a draft pick. And I'm not so sure that, they're willing to make that type of deal. As far as his value, we have him as a value of 165, which is a role player, which means he could play anywhere from a second to a fourth line role, depending on the team. He's probably best in a third line role. And draft pick wise, I think you could get, given the teams are overpaying at the deadline, you probably could get a third round pick, maybe 2 third-round picks, or even a second-round pick for a player.
You think
like
a second-round pick for a Duclair? That's sort of a premium pick for a guy that has struggled this year.
Yeah, I think that again, you're looking at teams that are overpaying at this time. The team that's going to add him is going to be a team that thinks they can win this year. And are going to add him, as that depth player, hoping that, when he plays with some better players, that he can add maybe some timely scoring, down the stretch and of course into the playoffs. But he's probably a couple of, most likely he's probably like a third or a fourth round pick, or maybe even a third and a fourth round pick type of player.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see him as a kind of a guy too that, unlike the other guys that we're going to talk about, at least other wingers we're going to talk about, that one thing that is on his side, even though he's had a poor season by his standards, is that he was part of a very good Panthers team last year that made it to the final. He was an important player on that finals team too, and so teams definitely value, right, the kind of guy that's done it before, that teams might kind of overlook Anthony's relatively poor season because they think, well, if we surround him with better players, a better situation, that his play will rise with that.
Yeah, and again, he, remember, he came off a pretty serious injury.
Sure.
And worked his tail off to get back in the lineup at the end of the year last year for the playoffs. So I think a change of scenery. I mean, not anything against the Sharks, but they're obviously a building team, and that's got to affect him a little bit and his game a little bit as well. So again, I think
I would ask about Duclair is about his skating, and you mentioned that it's still very very good. How does it, just in general, just how does it stack up to like what it used to be, or is it as good as it used to be? And in that case, then I'm sure then that teams will come a knocking. So I don't know what you think about that specific element.
We have his skating pretty close to what it was before.
Okay.
I mean, we rated skskating a 118 out of 150, which is a good score.
Yeah.
It's a good skater. It's not one of the top skaters in the league, but he's a good skater. And we also still have him as trending up. His game is trending upward. So despite the injury, he's still got a chance to get better. But again, when I say that, he's a role player. He's not going to turn into a top 3 forward. That's just not his game.
Okay. I do wonder about the cap circumstances. If the Sharks have to find either like a third party to take half the cap hit or retain some themselves, they don't have a lot of retention slots available. They've only got one more left, basically.
Right.
So.
And that's, I think, what we said before, Keegan, is that to try to make a deal with him is going to be difficult because of that $3 million. I mean, anybody that probably is going to add a Duclair is somebody that thinks that they need to add a piece for depth, and they're probably going to be up close to the cap, and not interested in taking on $3 million.
Yeah, so you got to find a way to get that cap hit.
Take something back, and as you say, I don't think the Sharks are going to be willing to take some of his money.
Right. Maybe like a third and a fourth, and then take on somebody's contract for like maybe the end of this year, just so the money just same money in, money out, and then save that retention spot for somebody else, maybe. So yeah,
and they may not have to take $3 million back.
Sure,
but just there's creative ways to do it.
Next guy, let's talk about Alexander Barabanov. He's about to be a UFA too. He has a 2.5 million AAV, and he has actually a 10-team no trade clause. And the thing about Alex is this year has been, I think, really tough for him. Unlike Duclair, where I think we've seen more of the flashes of sort of prime Duclair, Barabanov, I think, has had a very, very tough season. At least that's my view of it. So what are you guys seeing?
Yeah, he's his value is actually a little bit higher than Duclair on our program. He's valued at a 183. He's still a role player, but I think he's going to be difficult to trade because I think Duclair at least has the potential to be better offensively right now, and teams that are going to add a player, to go for it right now, whether it's to make a playoff spot or to make a run at a cup, I don't think this guy really is going to fit into their plans. So if he's going to be part of a deal, it's probably going to have to be part of a bigger deal. You know,
Yeah, I wonder with Alex too, because I don't have the same confidence I have with Duclair that a better situation will bring out a better player, because we've seen that obviously with Duclair that a better situation does bring out a better player, whereas Barabanov has always been on bad Sharks teams, so we really kind of don't know what he's going to be like on a better team. But I wanted to ask you too, in terms of your rating. So Barabanov higher than Duclair. Where does that come from? Is that just like based on last season, which makes sense because Alex had a pretty good season last year, whereas Duclair was coming off an injury? Or is that kind of like real time, like your scouts are still liking elements of his game, just for some reason so the rating is higher than Duclair's, but just for some reason you don't think he has a lot of trade value?
Yeah, well, I mean, his rating is higher, but when we rate players, we are rating them on all sorts of different things, from their skating, hockey sense, offensive ability,
different skills.
ability.
Okay.
Right. So, for instance, his skating is not as good as Duclair, but his hockey sense is a little bit better. But he really, as you said, he really right now is not getting it done enough offensively.
For sure.
He's just an average defensive player. He's a little bit better, as far as his competitiveness. He can contribute on the power play because he is a smart guy and can make some plays, but doesn't offer you much on the PK. And his physicality is way down.
Yeah.
And that's going to pick up in the playoffs, as we know.
And does your the system also, I guess, include like contract status, maybe just $500,000 cheaper as well, maybe? So.
Yeah, I mean, it's $500,000 cheaper, but let's remember we're prorating that over the last quarter of the season. So that $500,000 cheaper is maybe $125,000.
Yeah.
On your cap. I don't think that would be a big deterrent or a big plus. The fact that he's less than Duclair, I think it's again, when you look at his overall body of work, he could still snap out of it, but he's done nothing, probably because, as you said, Sheng, he's been in the Sharks organization the last few years. He's done nothing to show us that he's going to be probably anything more than he is. Duclair's been in another organization, one that was successful, and so I think teams see a little bit more upside with adding a guy like him.
Yeah. Keegan, do you want to propose your Barabanov trade from a couple weeks ago to Mike here and see what he thinks?
I can't even remember what it was. It was.
I think I remember it. Do you want to go ahead?
Barabanov. It was to Boston for like a 5th round pick and Jason Megna,
maybe a 5th and a 6th, and Jason Megna just to switch up contract. Just pick up Angel contract. Does that sound like Barabanov's value roughly? Like he's not going to get a Duclair value.
I can plug that right in right now, and we'll tell you.
Oh, nice. Okay.
We have a real-time trade machine. I think it was a 5th round pick or maybe a 6th.
I thought it was a 5th and a 6th. I thought you were aggressive with your lower round picks
to Boston.
Yeah.
And the other thing I failed to mention for both of those players is teams. For instance, Boston, one team that I know, they're looking at centers. And a lot of what the Sharks are trying to move here are wingers.
Sure.
And these teams are looking for centers at this time of year, because that's really where you need some depth in the playoffs.
Everyone keep listening. We have some centers coming, so we're just going to the wingers first. But anyway, what's the trade machine say about Alex to the Bruins?
So Barabanov to Boston for who now?
Jason Megna, just to switch up the NHL contracts, and maybe a 5th round pick and a 6th round pick.
And we'll throw in we'll just throw a 5th and a 6th this year.
Yeah, sure. Or whatever year, but
so that's an interesting deal. Our tale of the tape is that San Jose would give up 77 what we call team 33 points. It's not a terrible amount. The Sharks get an energy forward. and a penalty killer. They lose some goal scoring and depth scoring, but they've reduced their cap by 1.725.
Right. And what are the
Sure.
picks worth in this equation?
The picks are worth in this equation. It's Boston, who's obviously picking very low, at least as of right now.
Sure.
So the picks are worth the 5th round pick is worth 15 points, and the 6th round pick is only worth 4 points.
Okay.
Interesting. All right. So yeah, I mean, by I guess just the numbers, but I feel like there's a hidden value.
I think the Sharks could get could actually get a little bit more.
Like a 4th, maybe at very best, even though he's struggling the way he is.
Yeah. Well, let's try that. Let's take the 5th and the 6th out.
Yeah.
And let's add a 4th round pick. And yeah, that makes the deal a little bit better for the Sharks for sure.
Okay.
They still give up 56 points, but again, I don't know what the Sharks think of Barabanov, but it doesn't look like he's a guy in the future for them.
No, it doesn't. Well, speaking of another guy that may not be part of their future, Mike Hoffman, also going to be a UFA, and his AAV is quite a lot, unlike Barabanov's 4.5 million AAV. So that makes it much harder to move. And so, anyway, what have you guys seen of Mike or about Mike this year?
I'll pull Hoffman up here, but yeah, he's gonna be a tough one to move.
For sure.
I mean, he's had some good seasons in the past.
Right. Some excellent seasons. Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. But right now he's what do we have here? I'm stuck. Here we go. Okay. All right, Hoffman. So Hoffman, again, he's another one of the guys. I mean, most of the guys that you've got here as Sharks trade bait, we'll call them, are in sort of that same role player range. So Hoffman's score is a 174. Again, that cap hit is not good for moving him. And the other thing with Hoffman is, and he's really the only player I think on the list that you provided to us. He's the only player that's trending downward as his play and as a player.
Sure, from where he was before, for sure. Yeah, no, we can. Yeah, definitely.
And
we can
so,
see that. Yeah.
His skating is below, both Barabanov and of course Duclair. We score skating a 104 out of 150, which is a little bit better than average. His hockey sense is in the same range, a little better than average. His offensive ability, again, sort of in that same range. He's a 68 out of 100. Where he really can contribute is on the power play.
Right. But he hasn't been this year, really, though.
Right. And he should be able to contribute in the shootout. But, of course, teams aren't looking for shootout guys for the playoffs. And, again, a guy that's low physicality. He's a smart winger. He can shoot the puck. He can pass the puck pretty well. Plays on the perimeter. Again, not a very physical guy. I don't know how enticing that's going to be for the playoffs. And probably at this point he's a 3rd, 4th line guy, and especially for a team that's going into the playoffs. And at that cap hit, I think he's going to be tough to move.
Yeah, I think so for sure. Yeah, I don't know even if we need to talk about his trade value because I'm not sure if it's so high. So let's move on to Kevin Labanc. And it's actually same kind of discussion, maybe like Hoffman, also going to be a UFA. also with a very high cap hit, 4.725 million. Also a very difficult season for, well, like all these wingers for Kevin Labanc. So not asking in this case about the trade value. We're going to talk about some more exciting guys on the Sharks that might have a little more trade value. But in terms of Kevin, just what have you guys seen about his from his game this year? I guess that's what I think I'm more curious about.
Our scouts still have some liking for him for a few reasons, and for that reason, we have him as trending upward still.
Relatively young still, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, the thing that is not great for him is his skating. He's a dead average skater, but what he has going for him, and I think what would attract other teams to him, except for the fact that he makes a lot of money, is he works hard. He's a hard-working player, and he does it both, offensively and defensively. So that's a plus, especially in a playoff run. He also makes up for his, I don't want to call it poor skating, but average skating, because he keeps his feet moving. But another guy that's not physical, despite how hard he works, he can make some plays, but like Hoffman, his value is right on the number with Hoffman, 174. The only difference is this guy seems to work a little harder, and so for that reason, he's trending upward a little bit, but probably too much money for not enough back.
Yeah.
To pick up as a deadline move for anybody that's looking to do something.
This might be this might not be a question you can answer, but you mentioned that Labanc can work hard, and we've seen that at times when he's on his game. He's on top of the puck. He can actually be an effective forechecker. And so then I wonder then just why hasn't it worked with him and the Sharks? I don't know if your scouts have mentioned anything about that in their notes. Just why hasn't it been a fit? The Sharks seems like it should be a fit. Kevin has some offensive ability. The Sharks need as much help as they can get offensively. So it looks like it should be a match here, but it just hasn't worked.
I think the big problem for him again is his physicality. He just doesn't stick his nose in there enough, especially on the offensive end in front of the net. He's not really a presence there. And he doesn't seem to engage, particularly when there's bigger players. I mean, he's not a real big guy, first of all.
Of course, yeah.
And then if you're not a real big guy, you really need to be able to skate in this league. And he just is an average skater.
Okay. We've talked now about 4 wingers here, and we talked about Anthony Duclair, Alexander Barabanov, Mike Hoffman, Kevin Labanc. And so just a tie-up question for all these wingers. Do you see any good fits in general out there? You mentioned Boston's looking for centers. Any teams that you think are looking for pretty good depth wingers? Maybe a Duclair can be a good fit. Maybe is there any team that you can think of out there? I think the Rangers, for example, just lost Wheeler, so I just one name that pops up for me. But any that pop up for you?
Yeah, I think the Rangers is definitely. I mean, if there's a guy on this list that I think is that we've talked about so far, that I think it would be an interesting player for anybody, it is Duclair.
Yep.
And the Rangers are certainly a team that would be interested in somebody like him. I don't think any of the the teams that are probably not going to be in the playoffs are interested in giving up any prospects or even draft picks for Duclair. Maybe Phoenix or Phoenix and Arizona if they decide they're going to make a run here.
A little desperation move, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, because they've made some noise lately about staying there and doing the right thing for their fans, and they are finally sniffing at something. So that could be a possibility, but yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, the teams that I know that are really going for it they they look for depth in the middle. They're looking for centers.
Okay.
You can always take a center and put him on the wing. You can't always take a wing and put him in the middle.
Yeah. Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. Well, that
Declare's the guy out of that group of wingers for sure.
Sure. So now let's talk about the maybe more exciting portion for Sharks fans. The Sharks do have a very good center right now who might be available, and he's a bit of a surprise in terms of just how he ended last season. But you have Mikael Granlund, and Mikael Granlund has 2 years left at a $5 million AAV, and 2 years including this year. He's going to be a UFA at the end of it. And he's come back with, I think, a very strong season. And so how do your guys see Granlund's season this year?
Good. He's, the strength about him is he's versatile, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's a two-way guy. He's a two-way forward.
Yep.
The cap hit again on him is a lot. That's a problem, and you're going to have him for another year,
right?
At that number. Although he's been okay this year, and he's come back a little bit, I think overall, career-wise, he's probably trending downward.
Sure.
And it's just a heavy hit for a guy that's trending downward, not on the big side, right? Again, a guy that's not going to add physicality. Much like Labanc, I think you saw last year, especially if you're a Western Conference team, you're going to have to go through some pretty heavy clubs when you start thinking about guys like Vegas, Colorado, Vegas in particular. Last year, their D was enormous, right? And so you're gonna need some bigger, heavier forwards, I think, to push back. If you're gonna pick up a guy like this in the playoffs, and then if you're gonna keep that contract for another year.
I wonder with Mikael though, that because he's a guy that I think plays bigger than his size, and I understand that. Of course, there's only so much that you can do with that, but maybe if you put him with bigger wingers, that will help clear a little space for him. And like you said, he works hard. He's good two-way, and he does try. He does bang. He's willing to bang, even if it's not his forte. And so, anyway, given all that, and yes, his AAV isn't great, but maybe if the Sharks take on a contract, and considering that he is a center, I can see him being a very good third line center for a team, maybe for a Rangers. Yeah. I don't know. And so anyway,
I mean, he's a guy. I think if for instance Boston doesn't get what they want, they could look at a guy like Granlund, because they need so much in the middle if they're really going to make a run at it.
Do you think if
I was going to say it's going to be again hard to get the
just
cap
hard
to work out.
Hard to take that money.
Yeah,
sure.
And you're taking them, and you're taking it for next year too,
which is both good and bad, right? Like if he works out, then you've got him for another run for next year. But if he doesn't, then you're stuck.
Right.
Just like the Penguins were when they felt like they needed to move him to the Sharks because they took him on.
True.
And then
there is that risk, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, there you go, right? I mean, the money had to move in that deal, right? And $5 million of it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and maybe my view of him is colored a little bit by the Sharks' just general lack of competency this year, and so he's been one of the Sharks' few competent forwards on a consistent basis. And so I don't know, maybe the league doesn't quite see him as quite as valuable. Also considering that it didn't work out in Pittsburgh after the deadline. Also, he had trouble adjusting to Nashville years ago after the deadline too. And so maybe that's a question mark for him. One guy that I don't know if there's any question about his physicality at least, and his sort of his pedigree. Only problem is probably his contract is Nico Sturm. And Nico Sturm has one more year after this one. 2 million AAV, which is a little rich for a guy that's probably more like a fourth line center type. But anyway, what do you see as Nico's value, perhaps?
So his value isn't, necessarily as high as the other players overall.
Sure.
But I think that this is the classic, depth pickup for a team that's trying to go for it. Because he's big, he's physical. He's not the smoothest skater, but he's a strong face-off guy, right? With a reach. He gives a playoff team some heavy upside, on the fourth line. And the fact that he can play in the middle, he can win some face-offs, and he's a competitive guy. I think that he's a guy. 2 million, not the greatest deal, but compared to some of the other guys we've talked to, I think there's a way to make a deal for a guy like this.
Okay, what do you think he gets? Because he is a guy that I think I would say everybody will want on their team. It just that might be a little rich. So yeah, what kind of value? Everybody will want on their team, but of course his ceiling is limited. And so what does that move for at the deadline?
I think you could probably get a minor league prospect and a lower pick, somewhere in the fourth, fifth round range for a guy like this.
Okay.
I really do.
Oh, and actually, going back to I just forgot. We didn't ask you what Granlund's trade value might be. So let's say the Sharks take on maybe some money in return. So to make that cap hit a little more, maybe not retention, but maybe they take on another contract in return. And so if the money isn't as bad, where does Granlund's value lie for you?
I think if you take on a contract, they could probably get a fourth round pick and a fifth round pick with him.
Oh,
but
for Grant, okay.
Yeah, but you're going to have to take a contract on with them. I think it's going to be real tough to get a lot for him. I just don't. We've got his game trending in the wrong direction, and you add that to another year on the contract, somebody that's going to pick him up. I think they'd rather go for a guy like Sturm, to be honest with you, a guy that can, a guy that can give them more size. That's a decent face-off guy, and even though he doesn't skate great, he probably skates close to what Granlund does. Maybe not quite the offensive ability, but I think what you're looking to pick up here in either one of those players is a guy that can just be responsible on your fourth line and help in some of the dirty areas. And Sturm's probably going to do that better.
Okay. So what do you think then last year, just sticking with Granlund, I guess the final question about him is Pittsburgh traded a second round pick for him last year. And so was that sort of, I mean, yeah, I think Sharks fans are hoping with Granlund's sort of return to form this year that maybe another team would offer something of that caliber for a Granlund. And Pittsburgh did last year. And so what did you think of that last year when they did that?
I think Pittsburgh panicked last year, obviously. And you see why, because they cleaned the front office out after the season. And so I think they were just reaching for whatever they could get at the time. They knew the pressure was on. The Fenway Sports Group had bought the club. There was a lot of pressure on that front office, from Ron Hextall to Chris Pryor to Brian Burke.
Fair enough. Okay.
It was a new ownership group coming in, mid-season or near the end of the season, and
we needed to
I think they were grabbing it wherever they could to try to maybe save their jobs.
Yeah, we needed to catch Columbus before Jarmo Kekalainen got fired, basically, to try and get a good deal for or an overpayment for a guy like Granlund, I guess, or something like that.
Maybe. So in general, you mentioned Boston as a team looking for centers. Maybe the Rangers. I don't know. Who else do you see maybe looking for a third, a fourth line center out there, a playoff team?
I think one team is going to be Colorado.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think they're just I think they're going to try to add depth down the middle. I think they understand how important it is, and so I think that's a team, and I think that they will be willing to pay a premium to get the right guy.
Interesting.
Well, Sturm obviously won a Stanley Cup with them, and so obviously he's not going to play too high in the lineup for a team like that. But he's is a guy that can help you. Do you think Colorado's looking more for? Well, obviously they have Nathan McKinnon, but beyond that, are they looking more for 2C, 3C, 4C? What do you think?
I I think they're probably looking for a good third line center that if injuries dictate, they can move up and play in a higher role. Yeah, I think that's a team that's definitely going to go after a center.
Okay. Well, hopefully they like Granlund then. But finally, moving on to actually, we have a couple more positions left. Only one defenseman I'm going to ask you about, just because his name's been bandied about. It's interesting that his name is out there because he's young. He's just 25. Mario Ferraro, and Mario Ferraro's got 3 years left on his contract at 3 years, including this year. His AAV is 3.25 million. He's an interesting guy because I don't know what your scouts think, but a lot of the scouts that I talk to, I feel like there's sort of torn about him. Everybody loves his competitiveness, his off the ice, his leadership. He skates well. One-on-one, he defends hard. He always plays hard too. But before this season, though, his puck moving, I think, was a bit of a concern. Maybe this year, though, it's better. It looks the last couple of months like his puck moving has come along quite a bit, at least to my eye. So I wonder how your scouts have seen Mario Ferraro this year, if they've seen any growth in his game.
Yeah, our scouts really like this guy. We rate him a 520.
Wow.
Yeah, we really like him. He's a two-way defenseman. There are a lot of guys that are great going forward and offensive.
Erik Karlsson.
Yeah, exactly. There's some other guys that are big bodies that can stay back in their own end. This guy's got the potential to do both, and he's a really good skater. Well, yeah, he's a good skater. Put it that way.
Sure.
Where he's really good is he's smart. He's a really smart player. Better defensively than offensively, but he can do both. Competitive, as you said, but he can make plays with the puck, and like you said, he seems to be doing it a lot better this year. And he can contribute on special teams, both. He can be on your power play unit if you need him there, and he can kill penalties as well. So yeah, our guys like him. I think he's not real tall, but he's a solid guy.
Sure.
And his physicality could improve a little bit. Yeah, he could potentially be a top pair D, like a number 2 D in the right.
You guys like him a lot. Okay.
Yeah, in the right organization.
Yeah, like I talked to a lot of scouts who don't, at least not this season, but seasons past, that have not liked him as much. See him as more of a really, really good bottom pairing defenseman. I've always contended myself, though, that he's just on he looks bad because he's on a bad team. On a much better team, his abilities would shine. And I don't know if, top pairing, that's very lofty. I've always thought that he would be a very solid middle pairing guy for a playoff team if he has the right guys around him. But anyway, regardless, though, so Mario Ferraro, good. What kind of trade value do you think he can get? Do you think that he might be able to pull that elusive first round pick?
Possibly, if somebody, somebody who's got an injury situation on D that's really trying to, still make a run at it, or a team that's trying to fortify their D, with one more solid defenseman. There's always somebody like that. And given the trade deadline and the way people overpay for things, his cap hit is not terrible, and he's got time left on a contract too.
Right. And he's young too.
Yeah. He's there's a lot of upside with him overall. I think somebody would who would drop a first round pick for him. Certainly a second round pick for sure.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, I've heard.
I don't know why the Sharks, given their situation right now, would want to move a guy like this.
Right. Keegan and I, we've debated this on the show quite a bit, because not just his on the ice, but his off the ice intangibles. And he's young enough that he can be part of your next good Sharks team. But my guess is that they're probably angling for an overpayment. If somebody's going to pay through the nose, you get that first round pick. Maybe you get something else along with it for a young defenseman. Then maybe that's what they're kind of looking for.
Right. Yeah. But they'd be good to keep this guy, given where their organization is right now. He's a solid guy in any lineup, and again, he's a two-way defenseman.
Well, thank goodness, Sharks fans. It's something positive.
One thing, and it's like you said, I don't know what the Sharks defense would look like without Mario Ferraro. It would just be kind of a nightmare.
And I'll tell you, and I don't know this, but I know the person. I could see a David Quinn really liking a Mario Ferraro.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think David loves Ferraro and would be. David unfortunately has seen a lot of players he's liked, like a Timo Meyer and Erik Karlsson, leave, and so I don't know if I feel bad for David, but another one of his favorites leaves.
This guy is a lot like David was as a player.
Oh, that's interesting. I actually know. Yeah, because David's career actually, since this is sort of a side, but we don't know a lot about David Quinn, the player. And I don't know if you guys know, if you guys listening or watching know this, but David was actually a first round pick, I believe, by the North Stars in the 80s, defenseman, and the first round pick. And his career ended with, I believe, with blood, right?
Blood clotting. He had a blood clotting issue. Yeah.
Right. And so anyway, you know David for quite a while. Just what was David like as a player?
Yeah, he was a very good two-way defenseman out of Rhode Island, and then played at Boston University. I was in college with him at the same time, not at Boston University, but at the school up the street. And my roommate was actually the second round pick that year of the Minnesota North Stars, Ken Hodges Jr. So I know David quite well, and he was a real strong player, and it was unfortunate with his medical situation that he wasn't able to play in the NHL. But a two-way D, very smart player, and there's a lot of value there.
And also very competitive, right? So maybe Mario is a guy that David, I don't know, sees after himself, and so maybe he'll knock on Mike's door a couple times before deadline and puts in a good word for Mario. But one more guy for you, and thanks so much for your time, Mike. This has been really insightful. One more guy for you. Let's go to Between the Pipes, and we have Kaapo Kähkönen, who's had a very, very strong season on a bad team, but a very, very strong season overall. And he is going to be a UFA, currently 2.75 million AAV. And so what have your scouts seen of Kaapo?
So this guy's a good goalie. I mean, he's an NHL starting goalie, and they're not easy to find. And I think for the next 3 years he can and will be a starting goalie. He's very athletic, a butterfly guy, but he's very athletic. He recovers well. He moves side to side very well. Probably if there's if there's some weakness in his game, is he could use his stick a little bit better. But the way he moves and his athleticism is really good. Still think he's trending upward. His size is decent, and he's the last 2 years, I think, as a number one guy, he's gained a lot of experience. So remember, goalies tend to develop later than skaters, and so at what is he, 28,
27,
27 years old, he's got some years ahead of him, right? Now I don't think he plays as big as he is, not that he's a giant, but I think a lot of that has to do with his style. He's a butterfly guy, so maybe he looks a little smaller than he actually is in there. But again, very athletic guy, and I think with some good coaching too, he'll be a number one guy.
Yeah, I think with Kaapo, I mean, you touched on an interesting point that in terms of just sort of his ceiling, we've actually heard that about Kaapo since he's been with the Wild, right? Because he was sort of the Minnesota Wild's heir apparent. And then the Sharks actually they traded a good amount for him a couple trade deadlines ago. They traded Jake Middleton for him, pretty good defenseman there for him. And he's never really run with the number one job in terms of just the games he's played, right? Never really been in the playoffs. So he's still kind of just like sort of a mystery box, just insofar as he's obviously talented, but we haven't really seen him kind of take over and be like the undisputed number one guy for somebody. But what you say is interesting, though. It does kind of, I guess, back up what we have heard about Kaapo over the years, just sort of just the kind of amount of talent that he does have. And for a team acquiring him, he's got some upside because you don't have to pay a number one starting goaltending price for him. I think it's not like you had to pay a UC Saros kind of price for him, right? And if you believe in the talent, then maybe you can get something out of him that the Wild haven't been able to, the Sharks haven't quite been able to yet. So anyway, what do you think? Goalies, though, of course, are notoriously hard to peg because they just they don't go for a lot usually, unless it's a kind of a elite guy. And so what do you think his trade value could be?
So I again, as you said, goalie trades, not a lot of them at the trade deadline. These are deals that usually take place in the summer. I also think that if somebody's really out there trying to find a top goalie right now, they're probably looking at Boston. Because Boston's got that situation with the two number ones, as they still seem to think they have there, and
Markstrom too, right? Yeah,
and
Markstrom's the other guy,
and Markstrom's on. I had Markstrom when he was young. I like him. He's a good kid. He's a giant of a guy. I think it'd be pretty tough to make him your guy of the future, but maybe he's a guy, I think it would be tough to trade this guy right now. If you could, maybe a team in need would give you a third round pick for him, or
for Kähkönen. Yeah, because there's guys ahead of him in line. Yeah, that's what I was getting at when I brought up Markstrom, and you bring up the Boston goalies. Saros' name has been thrown out there too. So like, if you want a true blue number one, it might be out there. And if you want to roll the dice on Kähkönen, but playoff teams, like you kind of allude to, aren't trying to roll the dice on their goaltending this late into the season. And if they're getting somebody that's insurance policy, like a Kähkönen might be for them, they're not going to trade a lot for him. So all this leads me to say that, like, maybe for the Sharks, it might be worth just keeping him because he's not very expensive. Even if he hits free agency, he's not likely to be that expensive.
Right. I don't know why. I don't know why you wouldn't keep him. Again, I don't know their plan, but who do you want to play next year? And what type of team are you going to have? I mean, are you going to make the leap to be a playoff contender next year?
No, no,
Probably not.
This is a good, solid guy who still has some years ahead of him.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have any problem if I was the Sharks coming back with a guy like this on a reasonable contract and playing him next year.
Yeah, and just have him in Blackwood, and that's sort of a good sort of a support for your rebuild that your guys can grow and develop with some good goaltending behind them, which will I think help them kind of learn good habits if
Right.
they're not always kind of trying to make up for their goaltending. So, Mike, one more big question for you. We've talked about a lot of names here. We just hit the four wingers: Granlund, Sturm, Ferraro, and Kähkönen. Anybody else on the Sharks that you see as sort of a sneaky trade deadline candidate that we missed?
Let me look quick through here. And see if anybody. I mean, it's tough. I don't see any sneaky guys.
Okay.
I'm guessing that everything's okay right now with Logan Couture.
We really have no idea about that. But anyway, with his contract, as good a player as Logan is, and as desirable as he is as a kind of a playoff guy, his contract would make it, probably prohibitive to move him right now. So, yeah.
But I'm just going through some guys here.
Yeah, it's tough because it doesn't seem like there's a lot besides these UFAs that we can.
A lot of young, unproven guys too that show some ability, but not for a playoff run.
Yeah, but they're also not guys that you really want to give up right now.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah, they want to see what you got of them. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think probably the best trade piece they have is probably Duclair. And I say that because I'm not trading Ferraro if I'm the Shark.
Sure. Yeah.
I think after that, probably Granlund and Sturm is that some teams may want. I don't think they're the first guys people are going to call for at the deadline. But everybody doesn't get what they want, and as it gets closer and closer to the deadline, and you haven't done anything, somebody's still going to be out there looking for a center, a depth guy. I think Colorado's looking for a little bit higher end guy, but if they don't get him and they still want a center, maybe they come knocking for a Granlund or even a Sturm, right?
Okay.
But I think Duclair probably is probably their best piece to move at the dedeadline.
All right.
Love it.
Third round picks, everybody. Let's prayer circle for a third round pick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take what we can get.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's an advantage, as I said earlier, that they know they're a seller. But you don't want to disrupt your plan,
Sure.
And I don't know what their plan is. But I hope they do have a plan. I mean, I don't think you go through a season like they did this year so far without having a plan for the future. I mean, it takes some guts to stick with it. I'm sure the fans aren't happy, and you hear a lot of it through the years, but you got to stick to your guns and stick to the plan.
Right.
And so, I don't think you want to move any of these younger pieces. I think you've got a good, solid guy in goal. And let's be honest, they're not going to win the cup probably in the next year or 2 or 3. So that guys doesn't have to be your Stanley Cup winning goaltender.
Mm-hmm.
These guys don't have to be your depth in the middle at center. Hopefully those guys are coming. Yeah. But ultimately, I think any championship team, and these are the teams that are going to be buying, they need to be strong down the middle.
Okay.
They need to be strong in goal, and they need to be, 2 at least and probably 3 deep in the middle if you're gonna challenge to win the cup.
Yep.
Okay. Yep, absolutely. Well, Mike, thank you again for the time at this late hour. Really appreciate it.
Hopefully it helps you guys, and
it does, and hopefully everybody knows what Team 33 is now.
Yeah. Well, look, any of your folks that are interested, send them our way. We'll be happy to talk with them. And we are still working on, hopefully by this summer, developing an app that fans will be able to use as well.
Great. Love that.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you very much.
All right,
thank you so much, Mike. Nice to see you.
Let's see. Yep. Maybe I'll come on after the deadline and we'll analyze what happened.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah.
All right.
I love that idea.
Have a good night.
Guys.
Have a good one, Mike.